क्या काम करो मदद चाहिए अयो नसीहत ची मदद ए गुम हो गया अफगानिस्तान बहुत परेशान बहुत खाक में सर चिका करो ए बोले रो मुंतजर औलाद
I've been stuck here for the past 2 days. I'm trying to get in. I went to the Americans. They pushed me out. They kicked me out. I went to the Germans. They beat me out with the sticks. They fired us. 1 year old kid. They fired with the gas.
از ایران به خاطر جنگ آمدیم. جنگا بسیار شدید بود. مردم ها همه کس آواره و در اینم تو
Deprived, devastated, displaced.
Even a country that has tragically known generations of conflict, Afghanistan is in the throes of yet another chaotic and desperate chapter, an incredible tragedy for its long-suffering people. Afghanistan is spinning out of control.
A dire humanitarian crisis is unfolding in Afghanistan after the exit of US and NATO forces. Amid the violence unleashed by the Taliban and fears of a return to a brutal, repressive regime, the war-torn nation is witnessing another mass exodus. And the ones suffering the most are innocent civilians. After more than 4 decades of displacement, Afghanistan constitutes one of the largest and most protracted refugee situations in the world. According to a UNHCR report, over 550,000 Afghans have been internally displaced since January 2021 alone. And with the Taliban's return to power, Afghan citizens, especially women and girls, those associated with the Afghan government, international organizations or international military forces, and those who worked closely with US NATO forces as translators, contractors or guides face the biggest threat from a Taliban looking to rule by fear.
In the past weeks, tens of thousands have fled their homes. Currently, the overwhelming majority of displacement is taking place within Afghanistan itself. That's where humanitarian efforts also need to be focused. Over 500,000 people have been displaced within the country since the beginning of the year. Acute humanitarian needs are now spiraling. 80% of those forced to flee within the country are women and children.
After the 9/11 attacks, America wanted to topple the Taliban from power in Afghanistan. What was meant to be an invasion resulted in a 20-year-long occupation and warfare. Over the years, nearly 6 million Afghans have been rendered homeless. Of those, 3 million are displaced within Afghanistan. 2.6 million Afghan refugees are taking shelter in other countries.
The humanitarian crisis of incredible proportions is unfolding before our eyes. 14 million people are facing severe hunger. The conflict has combined with drought and the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 to push an already dire situation closer to a catastrophe.
Disturbing scenes of desperate Afghan civilians trying to flee the Taliban-controlled nation have flooded social media. Images of Afghans falling from the wheels of departing aircraft have gone viral. But where will the millions of refugees go? Is the world ready to shelter these displaced citizens?
If I go back to Afghanistan, they will not leave me because they will think I'm not from them, you know. So one of my friends went back there. When they catch him, they kill him. Yeah. So they say you need to go back from Europe or from America. They say you are not Muslim anymore.
Afghans are the third largest displaced population in the world, following Syrian refugees and displaced Venezuelans. A vast majority of displaced citizens from Afghanistan are living in Iran and Pakistan. The two neighboring countries host nearly 90% of displaced Afghans. That's more than 2 million registered Afghan refugees in all. Iran, which is already hosting nearly 3 million Afghan refugees, has agreed to set up refugee camps on its eastern borders. However, it has called for repatriation of refugees as and when Afghanistan is safe for return. Experts point out that with sanctions imposed by the US, it would be difficult for Iran to provide more support. Unlike 2001, Pakistan is not welcoming more refugees this time. Pakistan's military has reportedly completed 90% of fencing work along its 2,611-kilometer-long border with Afghanistan. Border points appear to have remained open to Afghans for now, but all border crossings are being heavily manned. However, Islamabad is reportedly preparing a comprehensive strategy to isolate refugees in temporary camps near the border.
As far as the preparation for any untoward incidents or any refugees influx is concerned, you see, government of Pakistan has taken a clear stance that we already have so many Afghan refugees, 3 million plus the registered, and if you include the unregistered, it's about 5 million plus.
Turkey is also building a wall along its border with Iran in a bid to stop the influx of migrants coming from Afghanistan. As of now, a 5-kilometer section is under construction, but Turkey is aiming to build a 295-kilometer-long wall on its Iranian border. Turkey's President Erdogan has vowed to increase efforts both diplomatically and security-wise to prevent an Afghan refugee influx into the country.
bizga lozim o'qil kelsak, o'qil yopsak, kelsak jamiga kelsak, o'yla. Tamam, biz nega keday o'qilgan? O'qilib bo'lmadik hamla. Bitta tam hayotim bitta men 19 yoshigaman.
Majburida. Ka Iran talarsu. Iran wala mun pridi, di khom khushkai kadal tarash jandarma و nisi بیرته ته خوشکی منګه زما خپل چې د سلوي خورځ کیږي چې زه مرز نه راغلم 15 ورځې کېږي زه تهران نه راغلی یم دغلته 11 ورځې موږ پیدروي کړی دلته شاته ملګری هم ناست ده 11 ورځې موږ 2 کسان پیدروي کړی راغلی تر دې ځای پورې ورسېدلی 11 دروان نه.
Meanwhile, Russia has rejected the idea of sending people evacuated from Afghanistan to neighboring Central Asian countries while their visas to US and Europe are being processed. Russian President Vladimir Putin said he did not want militants showing up under cover of refugees. Putin called the visa-free refuge of Afghan migrants in Asia unfair. So far, civilians have only fled in fewer numbers to countries neighboring Afghanistan, but the situation is rapidly changing. Hundreds of thousands of Afghans are now desperately seeking safe haven, appealing to countries to take them in. Several NATO countries, including Canada, France, the United Kingdom and Germany, are pledging to take in refugees. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said his country would resettle 20,000 Afghans, prioritizing minorities, including LGBTQ Afghans. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has said Berlin could grant asylum to 10,000 Afghan refugees. But Germany is headed for elections, and the issue of Afghan refugees could very well turn into a political hot potato. The United Kingdom has also said it would accept up to 20,000 Afghan refugees fleeing the country. The UK says priority would be given to women and girls who are facing a chilling future under the Taliban rule. However, French President Macron called for Europe to protect itself from a wave of irregular migrants from Afghanistan. He emphasized that Europe alone cannot bear the consequences of the current situation.
La déstabilisation de l'Afghanistan risque également d'entraîner des flux migratoires irréguliers vers l'Europe. La France, comme je l'ai dit, fait et continuera de faire son devoir pour protéger celles et ceux qui sont les plus menacés. Nous prendrons toute notre part dans le cadre d'un effort international organisé et juste. Mais l'Afghanistan aura aussi besoin, dans les temps qui viennent, de ses forces vives. Et l'Europe ne peut pas, à elle seule, assumer les conséquences de la situation actuelle. Nous devons anticiper et nous protéger contre des flux migratoires irréguliers importants qui mettraient en danger ceux qui les empruntent et nourriraient les trafics de toute nature.
But are these numbers sufficient? Will these limited numbers be able to help millions of Afghan refugees? Are countries like UK, Germany and Canada implying that refugees exceeding the limit will not be welcome? Are these countries refusing to share the responsibility of the horror caused by the Afghan war?
افغانستان آمدیم میخوایم بریم به طرف اروپا. افغانستان خیلی وضعیتش خراب است. دیگه طالبان آمده در افغانستان اصلا سر میبرند. دیگه کاروبار نیست در افغانستان. بدبخت بیچاره آواره شدیم. این مرزا را زده آمدیم و به اینجا رسیدیم.
The UN Refugee Agency has even issued a non-return advisory for Afghanistan, calling for a bar on forced returns of Afghan nationals, including asylum seekers who have had their claims rejected.
As of today, those who may be in danger have no clear way out. We continue to urge all countries neighboring Afghanistan to maintain open borders.
Uganda and Albania have agreed to temporarily host 2,300 refugees on the request of the United States. India too has announced that it will issue an emergency e-visa to Afghan nationals in view of the prevailing situation in Afghanistan. The Modi government scheme is likely to benefit religious minorities like Hindus and Sikhs who fear attacks from the Taliban in Afghanistan. Despite the mounting humanitarian crisis, there seems to be a deficit of compassion for refugees in 2021.
We will see many refugees from Afghanistan resettle in our country in coming months, probably in your neighborhood. And over the next decade, that number may swell to the millions. So first we invade, and then we're invaded. It is always the same.
The Democrats cannot be allowed to take a crisis of their own making and then turn around and use that crisis to change or flout U.S. refugee policy. They've already tried that on the border. Because they turned the border into a magnet and women and babies are showing up there, it's desperate. We now have to let everybody in.
Amid violence raging in Afghanistan, 6 European Union countries, Germany, Austria, Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands and Greece, sent a joint letter to the European Commission warning against halting non-voluntary returns of Afghan migrants. They argue that any suspension of deportations would encourage more Afghans to leave their home for the United Nations.
This wasn't unexpected, but the course of time it happened was very unexpected. The betrayal of the international community was unexpected. What caused so much pain and anger and disappointment was that the international community ignored listening to Afghans while deciding for Afghanistan.
The heart-wrenching image of a 3-year-old Syrian boy whose body was found lying face down on a Turkish beach had become the defining picture of the 2015 Syrian refugee crisis. The little boy was one of at least 12 Syrians who drowned while reportedly attempting to reach Greece. Now, thousands of Afghans are scrambling to flee the country, and they've left politicians in Europe in panic mode over another exodus of Muslim asylum seekers and a repeat of the 2015 situation. In 2015, millions of asylum seekers from the wars in Syria and Iraq made their way to Europe, reshaping the politics in EU nations. The influx of Syrian refugees led to disputes within the 27-nation bloc on sharing the burden of accommodating migrants among themselves. Now, many populist and far-right parties in some European countries are exploiting the anti-immigration sentiment, with slogans like 2015 cannot be repeated.
Macron a dit aussi que l'Europe ne peut pas tout. Ça veut dire que l'Europe ne peut pas, ou la France ne peut pas accueillir toute la misère afghane. Ce n'est pas le cas. On ne va pas accueillir toute la misère afghane. On va accueillir ceux qui arrivent jusqu'ici. Et une fois qu'ils sont là, il faut leur accorder asile parce qu'ils fuient le terrorisme, comme je vous ai expliqué tout à l'heure. Ils vont être privés de toute liberté et il y en a beaucoup qui vont être en danger de mort.
Taliban is projecting itself as a new, moderate group that will respect women's rights and not go on a revenge rampage against those who aided the NATO forces. Recently, the Taliban issued a number of statements promising amnesty for those who worked for the previous government. The Taliban also assured that women can work and girls can go to school. But is the Taliban really going to stand by its words? Many eyewitnesses tell a story different from what the Taliban would have the world believe.
ترکا داخل رکشا شیشته بودن از کورس میرفتن طرف خانهشان قسم چبلی پای ما دپایشون چبلی بوده اوها را از رکشا پایین کردن لطکوب کردن همراه کیبل که چرا قسم چبلی میپوشه که جوانا را خراب بکنی.
Receive a letter from Taliban. They say that you should leave Afghanistan with your all children. Otherwise, we will kill all your family and yourself.
Taliban's efforts might appear to be in contrast with its past image, but there are little signs of reformation. Many experts are of the opinion that Taliban hypocrisy is just an effort to correct their image, while nothing much has changed vis-à-vis their ideology.
The eyes of the world are on Afghanistan. We expect the Taliban to uphold their commitments and ensure that Afghanistan does not again become a safe haven for international terrorism. The Taliban must put an end to violence around the country and uphold the fundamental rights of all Afghan citizens, men, women and children.
Fresh internal conflicts, resistance and infighting is likely to uproot more Afghans. With the withdrawal of US and NATO forces, several political factions have started to emerge. The Northern Alliance is already taking shape in Panjshir. Amrullah Saleh, who declared himself caretaker president, has challenged the Taliban. Saleh, along with Ahmad Massoud, son of legendary Mujahideen commander Ahmad Shah Massoud, has reportedly assembled a fighting force of about 9,000 men to resist the Taliban. This battle of resistance against the Taliban could lead to more displacement of many Afghans. In the past decade, the word refugee has been often in the headlines. According to UNHCR, at least 82.4 million people around the world have been forced to flee their homes. Among them are nearly 26.4 million refugees, half of whom are under 18 years of age. According to Amnesty International, more than 2/3 of all refugees in 2019 came from just 5 countries: Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan and Myanmar. In 2019, only 0.5% of world refugees were resettled. Syrians amount to the largest number of refugees since 2014. According to the UN Refugee Agency, to date, more than 12 million Syrians have been displaced and approximately 13.1 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance. The Afghan crisis has further added to the number of refugees who are in dire need of support. Syria yesterday, Afghanistan today. Where tomorrow? The world cannot afford to turn away from this crisis or pretend to stay insulated, since the fate of refugees affects us all.